Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah wa alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah amma ba'd. We hope and we pray that everyone is doing well inshallah ta'ala tonight. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He blesses us all, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and makes our gatherings blessed gatherings in which we remember Him and He remembers us consequently, and His remembrance of course is better, and that His sakeenah descends upon us, that the angels surround us, and that His mercy descends upon us all, Ya Rabbil Alameen. To proceed, inshallah ta'ala, we're continuing our ongoing program, the top 100 questions that every Muslim should know. Last time, as a recap, we asked about what is character. We talked about character is the description of the human being from the inside, whereas there's an outward description, there's an outward khalq, and then there's khuluq, which is on the inside, right? There's the outward creation, how the person looks, and since that can be developed, that can grow, you grow into it, etc. That also character is something that we can also develop and work on, and whatnot. A person naturally is born with a mixture of positive and negative characteristics. There's good and bad. Right? Some people naturally might be more stingy. Some people naturally might be more giving. Some people naturally might be more transparent, telling the truth. Some people might be more concealing, deceptive, etc. This is natural. However, these traits can be developed, just like our bodies can be developed. Our outside, the physical creation part of us can be developed, can be worked on. We grow into it. It's influenced by our environment. It's influenced by our parents. It's influenced by the people that were around. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, "Al-mar'u ala dini khalilih, falyanzur ahadukum man yukhalil." The person is upon the religion, the faith of his khalil, his close friend, his intimate friend, not just a friend, sadiq, right? But here his khalil, the person that he hangs out with the most, the person that he's with, the person that he likes, etc. He's upon that religion. Ad-din huna, and it doesn't mean Islam or anything else. It means the type of behavior, right? The type of characteristics, the traits, which is why it's always recommended that we naturally will mirror the people that we're around, so we need to be around good people, inshallah ta'ala. If we identify an illness within us, how do we get rid of it? We talked about this last time, etc. Today, inshallah ta'ala, for today's question, the question is, what are some of these negative traits that we're talking about? And then subsequently, how can we get rid of them? So it's not only identifying, diagnosing the disease, but also how do we remedy it, right? So this is a little bit spiritual medicine, so to speak. We have doctors here, mashallah, alhamdulillah. We're talking about spiritual ailments. And there's too many to count, right? Many of the scholars have said, obviously we do, one of the methods, the medicines, is that once we identify the trait, we do its opposite. So if I have a trait of stinginess, its opposite would be to be generous. But I have to identify first that this is something negative. Many stingy people think that their stinginess is a positive. Okay? So diagnosing that is key, number one, and this takes an element of self-awareness and honesty with oneself to know, to identify the negative trait, and then to try to remedy it. And this is by forcing ourselves to be outside of our comfort zone, to do things that we're not used to doing. This is going against things that sometimes are put into us. Sometimes we're taught these things. So there are people that are naturally stingy, and some people are taught stinginess, right? And the opposite is true. There's that story, I don't know if I've shared it here at MIC. There's a story of a traveler. He was a scholar. I think it was Ibn al-Muflih, if I'm not mistaken, one of the Hanabila. And I can go back and, this is just a little tidbit. He was traveling in the desert. He's running out of food and water. And he sees a house. Okay? So he goes to the house, knocks on the door. A lady answers the door. And she's like, "Can I help you?" He's like, "Look, I'm looking for just some food, water, just a place to stay, just for a little bit. I'm a traveler, kada." Now, back in the day, it is a sunnah. This sunnah is no longer applied, of course. The sunnah is, if you have a visitor, a guest, he can stay up to how long? 3 days. 3 days. Right? This is the sunnah. right? There's no hotels back in the day. You can't just go on your phone and find a hotel nearby or whatever, all those things. It was a right. We actually do have a right upon one another that if somebody needs a place to stay, up to 3 days. This is a lost sunnah, of course. So the guy, and he didn't want to ask for 3 days. He just literally needs hosts. Some are hosting, which is مَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلْيُكْرِمْ ضَيْفَهُ. Whoever believes in Allah on the last day, let him be generous to his guest. The lady, very generous. So she said, here's the guest room where we keep visitors. So he's far away from the house. She's alone, but she says, you can stay here until my husband gets here. She's bringing him water. She brought him food. He stayed. He's there. At the end of the day, the husband shows up and he goes ballistic. He's upset. Not at the fact that he was alone in the house and there's only the lady, مثلا. لا. He was upset that she gave him water and food. How could you do this? Blah, blah, blah. This is our money. This is our sustenance. We can't just share it with anybody who shows up. Kada, kada. She's trying to tell him, you know what I mean? All these ahadith. The wife, she's telling him, it's good to be generous, blah, blah, blah. This is terrible. He kicks the guy out. And the scholar, he said, I've never been kicked out of a house before. This is the first time. And it's in the middle of the desert. He doesn't know who these people are. And the guy did it knowing that he doesn't know who they are, so he won't talk bad about them. And if his reputation was on the line, he might not have done it. There are people who are generous, especially the Arabs in the Jahiliyyah. They were especially generous when people would speak of their generosity. But if the generosity wasn't going to be spread around, they wouldn't be that generous. So it's mainly about reputation, not about the love for generosity. طيب. He leaves. He says, I walked, and about an hour's time, I found another house. I go knock on the door, and a lady, same thing. A lady opens the door, and he says, I need a place to stay, blah, blah, blah. And the lady says, La, we don't have anything. We don't have water, we don't have food, we don't have anything for you, leave. The husband on the inside hears, he comes running out. He's like, I'm sorry. Ta'al. No, we have all these things. My wife is just being a little difficult. Ta'al. Sit down. He sits him down. Now he's with this guy. And the guy is very generous to him. He's bringing him all this food. And the scholar had the Ibn al-Muflih. He says, يَخِي رَأَيْتُ شَيْئًا عَجِيبًا الْيَوْمِ. I saw something very strange today. You guys are the second house that I've been to today. I was at another house before. And he tells him the story. The guy, Sahibul Bayt hada, he says, the lady who answered you is my sister. In the first house. That was my sister. And she's married to my wife's brother. Yeah, خلاص. And he says, this is something that we've been having to deal with. فيهم الطبع, right? They have this natural tendency to be stingy. وَنَحْنُ we grew up being very generous. وكذا. And Allah al-Musta'an says, this is what I'm dealing with, and Allah al-Musta'an. This is he says, so this is a trait that they have. Now whether they grew up with it, whether it was خلاص, this is what they were taught, right? And I feel bad for that guy, and he's married to the he says خلاص, this is his test. He's identified, he's going through it. طيب. We said this is something that we said last time. I'm repeating it now just for the benefit, inshallah ta'ala. Remember, all these traits are based off of things that are necessary in the human being. So stinginess, too much of it is bad. But if a person is too loose with their wealth, with their money, etc., it'll also lead to their demise. There's a purpose behind it. Just like there's a purpose behind everything that Allah created, inside of us, outside of us, etc., everything has a purpose. And so the challenge really with these traits is to get it to where it is balanced. Even the heart has a job. The heart's job, aside from pumping blood, the spiritual heart is to love, to express love. Love expressed incorrectly is bad. It can go to an extreme from a dunya perspective, and it can go to where love expressed in the wrong areas is also bad. We said that Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he says that the source of every action of a human being is love. Even an act of stealing or murder. And when a person steals, it's because he loves it for himself more than he loves it for someone else. Which is why you can't be a believer until you love for your brother, for all people, what you love for yourself. You can't. صح. It's emanating from love. When a person murders, we mentioned, when a person commits the act of murder, it's because they love whatever they were fighting over more than they love someone else's life, humanity, which is terrible. That's misplaced love. The best thing that a person can love is their creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why they said that if a person never loved Allah, it's as if they never knew what love is. Because they never expressed love in its truest form, love for one's creator, love for one's sustainer. And from that love, all other love emanates, really flows from that. That's when we can have healthy love, etc. طيب, how can we better ourselves? Self-reflection, which is very difficult. Because unless a person is honest with themselves, they're not going to figure out what's wrong. We have honest, good friends, right, where they tell us they're mirrors of ourselves. A good teacher, number 3, and we said this one can be abused. But a good teacher will always be able to highlight for the student, hey, look, this is maybe something that we can work on. This is something kada. And a good teacher, by the way, from this emanates parenting. Parenting is a subset of teachers. This is why parents have a job that if they see certain traits in their children, that they try to correct them. This is why, for example, if a kid, and when we have children, one of my kids, when they were much younger, we caught them lying. And about something, small. And I told him, it's not about what you did. The lying to me is worse, 10 times worse than anything else. And I tried to explain it. Alhamdulillah, since then, we haven't seen it. But I told him, lying is way worse than whatever it is that you did. You thought you were covering up a mistake? Don't. So it's the parent's job to try to correct. And sometimes it'll be difficult. Sometimes you'll see these traits naturally occurring in some of the kids and not in some of the other ones. And it's your job as a teacher, as a parent, to try to correct these as much as possible, inshaAllah ta'ala. Number 4, the 4th method, so we said self-reflection, good friends, and this is mutual, so this is us with each other, giving honest advice, teachers and their students, which among it is parenting. And then number 4 is us analyzing people in general, that when I see, even if he's not my friend, if I see a negative trait in another person, I have to think, this is something that I hate. Then it's a pet peeve of mine. It drives me nuts. I have to see, wait, maybe I have that too. Maybe I'm doing it to others. I can't just assume that other people are doing it. I have to also assume that maybe this exists in someone else. That's why if a person truly wants to attain the hereafter, they have to fulfill a condition. They have to have a grasp, a hold on to something, and they have to protect themselves in a fortress. The condition is leaving sins. The grasp that they hold on to is knowledge. And the fortress is going to be al-khulwa, which is where the person is alone to remember Allah. That's your fortress. Wallahi, when a person is alone to reflect, to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's the best time for them. And they need to grasp a hold of knowledge, and they need to abandon sinning. And if you do all these 3, khalas, we're done. We can close shop. I mean, obviously, we still need more knowledge. طيب. Of the negative characteristics, we'll mention, we have 15 minutes, so we're going to go over these quickly, inshaAllah ta'ala. The first one is the first sin that Adam alayhi salam committed, which is why it's going to be number 1, which is what? Eating the apple. It's the negative trait of hunger. Well, it's a disobedience, yes, but it stemmed from hunger. Al-ju'. At-tama'. It wasn't from hunger, right? But we're talking about afat al-batn, right? We'll talk about in terms of let's talk about the belly in the sense of eating. It was because he ate. Eating is a natural occurring thing. A person can eat too much, and a person can eat too little. Sah. But it was eating, and the act itself, the sin that he committed, wasn't eating the apple. Of course, it was shaitan fooling him. He wanted to attain what a shajarat al-khuld, the tree of eternity, etc. He was promised. There was also the element of this is forbidden, so immediately that's the only thing he focused on. He was new. Think about it. In a sense, Adam alayhi salam was perfectly created, but it was also a newborn. Zero experience. Alhamdulillah, we're not born like that. Wallah, it's out of the mercy of Allah that all of us, we go through childhood, we go through development until we're adults. He was a fully formed, perfect adult, but is also a newborn. Which you're gonna have these rookie mistakes, the first mistake. This is something you shouldn't do, don't do it. That's immediately where his attention goes. It's the human nature. But it was in shahwat al-batn. So we're talking about the desire of the belly to eat. Is there a balance? Yes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Kulu washrabu wa la tusrifu." Eat and drink, but do not go too extreme. Right? There was a Christian doctor in Egypt. This is at the time of the companions. And it said that he converted after hearing this verse. When the Muslims conquered Egypt, he was a big doctor there. And he said, هذه الآية جمعت الطب كاملا. This ayah has combined all of medicine, at least for their time. Eat, drink, but not too much. If we applied this, eat, drink, not too much. Think about all of the, mashallah, Dr. Bashar gave a whole talk about diseases and all these things. Then the message kept on coming. Watch your diet, what you eat, watch what you eat. If we fix this, so many things would be fixed. Right? And even in terms of what we eat, they didn't have that problem as much as we have now. This processed food and ultra processed food and all these other things. So we can eat too much. They had the challenge, so if you look in some of the books, of eating too little. Because eating too little is also dangerous. People who didn't eat enough, hatta there was a group of people, zuhad, people who were practicing zuhd, which is that asceticism, they're abandoning the dunya. They made it a point to not eat. So they would be frail in terms of their bodies, they would be very weak. And they would miss out on many obligations, like waking up for Fajr, staying up until Isha, because they've weakened their bodies so much, but out of a religiosity. There was a trend of not eating that much out of a sense of like abandoning the dunya. But that was also detrimental to their iman, because now they can't fully fulfill their obligations. And on the opposite extreme, you have that, eating too much. Al-Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah, in one of the narrations we have a story where he invites one of his students to come and eat. The student knocked on his door, came in, found Al-Hasan was eating, says, "Halum, tafaddal, come and eat with me." He says, "La akaltu hatta la astati'." He says, "I already ate until I can no longer eat." So Al-Hasan rebuked him. He says, "Awa ya'kulu al-mu'minu hatta la yastati' an ya'kul?" Does the believer ever eat until he can no longer eat anything? He says, "Come and sit and eat with me." So he's making a point of, anytime somebody invites you, out of respect, you should accept their invitation. Even if they give you something, eat. Because you should always have room, and you should never eat to the point where you can no longer eat. Of course, I'm guilty of this myself, where there's been too many times where I've eaten until khalas, there's no more room. Once in a while, no problem, inshallah ta'ala. Al-Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah and Imam Ahmad both met each other multiple times. They were students of one another. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah was later than Imam Shafi'i. He learned from Shafi'i a lot. And so when he visited him, he ate and ate and ate. And he said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I know that your income is halal, فَأُرِيدُ أَنْ أَسْتَكْثِرَ مِنْهُ." He says, I know that your income is completely pure, so I want to take as much of it as I can. And they say, "Okay, that's fine, that's not a problem." And he had a good intention behind it. There's a good intention behind it. It's not done frequently where the person eats a big meal. Khala, that's fine. But remember, what did the Prophet ﷺ say in terms of balance? It's a third, right? Right, a third for his food, a third for his drink, a third for his breathing. And unfortunately, we do half and half, and then there's no more breathing. Khalas, it's like, oh, I can't breathe. I'm done. I can't breathe. Oh, it's a good thing. I can't breathe. Alhamdulillah, I'm completely, Allah musta'an. Right, there was a sheikh. My grandfather told me this happened, where the sheikh was invited, right, to the house, And they said, Sheikh, and the Sheikh just got done telling them about this hadith. And he's bringing his students, they're like, we're invited somewhere, let's go. So they go, and they see the Sheikh eating. Sheikh, didn't you just say a third? He says, La kullun adra bi thuluthi. You know, everybody knows how much their own third is. You're judging me based upon your third, but my third is bigger. He has a big, his stomach. Anyways, Alhamdulillah. The point is that there's balance that can be achieved, and by doing something that's balanced, wholesome, right, correct, inshallah ta'ala, there's a lot of remedies that will happen. So hunger can even be a characteristic that can be taken to an extreme, one or the other, right? طيب, the second shahwa is what? الشهوة شهوتان, right? There's the two desires. So I have shahwat al-batn, wa shahwa thaniya, shahwat al-farj, right? The shahwa of the privates. It also has a purpose, a function. Just like food is necessary for life, procreation is necessary for life. Without it, humanity will not continue. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he says an amazing thing. He says, the pleasure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in all of these things is necessary for the continuation of humanity. Both in eating, because here's the thing, if food wasn't pleasurable for us, trust me, nobody would eat. Yani there was a chef who got mouth cancer. May Allah protect all of you, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Mouth cancer, I listened to his story. Crazy. First off, can he continue as a chef? His whole job is to taste food and to prepare well-tasting food. He can't continue. It's now based on texture, all these other things. But he said multiple times, he lost 100 pounds because he wasn't eating enough. Even though he's in the food industry, he's like, I had to force myself to eat because I no longer derived pleasure from eating. And many of these people, by the way, commit suicide, etc. Because when you no longer find it pleasurable, it's like, what's the point? Why am I even doing this? And it becomes mechanical. Man, a'udhu billah. So think about it. The last time we were thankful for the fact that we could taste food and it tastes good, هذه نعمة لحالها والله. This is such a blessing that we can derive pleasure from something necessary for life. So the other desire, the other pleasure that we find, right, from the sexual organs, is also necessary for life. And Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he says that there's a wisdom in the sense that it's necessary for the continuation of humanity. And then number two, حتى تكون هناك لذة يقاس عليها لذة الآخرة. It is there in order for us to experience such an immense amount of pleasure, for us to be able to imagine what it would be like in the hereafter. That peak of pleasure, right, the climax, etc., is similar to the pleasures that a person is going to experience in the hereafter. And so this is why it's there that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us a taste of something that we can experience in Jannah. Okay? Now, can that be done in extremes? 100%. If a person chases that pleasure and makes it his goal and his desire, everything in life, he'll be destroyed. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, مَا تَرَكْتُ عَلَى الرِّجَالِ فِتْنَةً أَضَرَّ عَلَى الرِّجَالِ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ. I have not left a fitna worse for men or more dangerous for men than women. By the way, limiting the understanding of this hadith to just the sexual desire is also incorrect. Women are a fitna, a test, in many ways. In taking care of them, being a good husband, being a good son, being a good father, etc. Right? Handling them, there's challenges that come with it. A man's mind works very differently than a woman's mind. It doesn't mean that one is superior, it's just that they're different. We have to understand this, we have to realize this, we have to accommodate our wives, etc. So it is a fitna, and a person can be destroyed if he doesn't properly understand and treat this fitna properly. Okay? But it also has the element of desire as well. So we have to realize that it can be done in extreme. And the opposite extreme is also true. What happens when a person neglects it and does not give it its healthy outlet, its healthy, what's the word that I'm looking for? The healthy way that it's expressed can also lead to a ton of problems. Just look at when a religious person, a monk, commits to celibacy. First off, is it even possible? Second, what happens in all the distortions and حتى the cloudiness of the mind that happens and the over-obsession with it. And the thing is, they think that it's righteousness to not engage in it because it's looked at as sinful. Sheikh Yasser talked about this in his series. But there's so many problems that come with it. And you have that debate where there was a Muslim scholar who wanted to debate some Christians. And they invited, the Christians are very organized, they have a hierarchy, there's the main priest, and then there's the lower end, the priest, and the middle range priest. There's a ranking. And they wanted to debate a Muslim, and the Muslim scholar showed up by himself. He doesn't have a ranking, he doesn't have, so we don't have a hierarchy. He just shows up by himself. And they told him, first off, he showed up late. They told him, you're late. He's like, it's okay, I'm busy with my wife and kids. This is what he said. He knows that these Christians do not have families. They don't have wives and kids. So he says, I was busy with my wife and kids. And they said, oh, okay. He's like, yeah, so how are your wife and kids? He's asking the big shot. One of the smaller priests, he says, Wayhak, woe to you. Don't you know that our priest is higher than to have a wife and kids? He's like, wow. So you're saying that he's better than God in your religion because you gave God a wife and kid? Khalas, debate finished. Because they did this in front of a king. Khalas, the debate was over. The king was like, he's like, Khalas, assalamu alaikum, I'm done. Because it's like in our religion, God doesn't have a wife or kid. It's like, God, laysa mithlika mithlihi shay. You made yourself better. A'udhu billah. So, anyways, the point being, there's extremes. And Islam teaches us balance. Right? Islam tells you, get married, do it properly. It's celebrated but regulated, right? What was Sheikh Yasser, he says that, it's something that is encouraged but it's regulated. So we have balance. It's not all out, but it's not completely zero. It's well regulated. And then the last one is the tongue that we'll discuss today. Al-lisan. This is why, and this is from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he combines everything that we just said. Man yadmanu li ma bayna lihyayhi wa ma bayna rijlayhi admanu lahu al-jannah. He who guarantees what is between his lihyayhi, his two beards, which is his mustache, and his actual beard, which is his mouth. Everything in terms of what it eats, consumes, and also what comes out of it in terms of words. Right? So we talked about hunger. وَمَا بَيْنَ رِجْلَيْهِ, and what's between his legs, which is his privates. He's using a euphemism to be respectful. He says, I guarantee for him Jannah. I guarantee for him paradise. If he guarantees, he protects, safeguards these things. Which summarizes everything that we've said so far. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, this hadith has some have said it's a little weak, but معناه صحيح. He said, لا يستقيم إيمان عبد حتى يستقيم قلبه. A person's iman will not be upright until his heart is upright. وَلَا يَسْتَقِيمُ قَلْبُهُ حَتَّى يَسْتَقِيمَ لِسَانُهُ. And his heart will not be upright until his tongue is upright. So the tongue there's a direct link between the heart and the tongue. And it's a two-way, by the way, link. So sometimes we overfocus that whatever's on the tongue is usually a symbol of what's on the heart. But the opposite is true. That I can, through the words that I choose to utter, also influence my heart, which is why dhikr is so beneficial. Because sometimes a person will say, Yakhi, dhikr is only on my tongue, I feel like my heart, there's no khushu', etc. We say, continue, because eventually it'll enter the heart as well. It'll help it. When you choose in your mind to say vulgar language, bad words, you're backbiting, you're lying, etc., that'll eventually affect your heart as well. And if I choose to be upright and only speak when necessary and speak good, etc., which is hard, these are traits and characteristics that are difficult. This is why the ailments, the illnesses of the tongue need a whole category by itself. There's 9. So inshallah ta'ala, that's going to be next time. Next time is how can I fix my al-lisan, the tongue, the mouth, and what it utters. Next time, inshallah ta'ala, that's going to be the question, and there's 9 that we're going to go over quickly. Yani, it might be too quick for some of them, but yani, it's meant to be. By the way, next week, inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to be out in Umrah, so we won't have class next Monday. I think I'll be back the Monday after. I think. Inshallah. I need to look at because I think we arrive in the morning, inshallah ta'ala. Anybody have any questions? Inshallah. Question?
Just for correction purposes, when you asked what did Prophet Adam did, I heard apple. So as far as my understanding is concerned, Islam does not mention what.
Sah. Did I say apple? Yes. Oh. Yeah. I'm sorry. It's not. You're correct. It's not an apple. لا ليست مذكورة. Yeah, it's not mentioned. It's not mentioned what the fruit was. No. To say that it's an apple, yeah, I think I heard somebody say apple, and that's why I repeated it. Who said it?
I missed it.
Oh, okay. Inta Allah yasam Abu. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, go ahead.
On that designation that you call it a fruit, is it really a fruit in the physical sense, or is it a symbology of something?
So, is it an actual fruit? So we don't take what the Quran says as symbolism unless there's specific proof for that. Now, the story is symbolic in many ways, for sure, right? There's a lot of, but is it a metaphor, or was there, I don't think that's the case. I think there was something physical, but it does symbolize, like you said, a lot of meaning behind it. It's not just meant to be a fruit in the sense, there's a lot of other things behind it. No. Because it's called Shajarat al-Khuld. It's called the tree, this is actually explicitly mentioned in the Quran, the tree of eternity. And Shaitan in Surah Al-A'raf, he actually promises them, he says, if you eat from this, you will either become angels or you'll become eternal, right, creatures. And that's why, فَدَلَّهُمَا بِغُرُورٍ. There was an element of ghurur, he fooled them. And
Ascribing something to like physical act like eating meat, it's something, doesn't necessarily have to be an apple. It could be something.
it could be anything. Yes. By the way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala physically embodied in the hereafter, many things that are intangible here will become tangible there, right? So there's a lot of that as well. Like your deeds will become something tangible that are weighed. But also my deed itself, my action is intangible. We know this. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can create whatever He wants. So that's an element of creation that is in His hands. Death will be brought in the form of a ram and then will be slaughtered. But death is an intangible, but it will become tangible on the Day of Judgment. There's a lot of these things in the unseen, which is why some people would reject them, because we're using our experience here. Death is an intangible. How can this happen? So they would reject it, but there's no reason to reject, because Allah can do that on the Day of Judgment. So Allah knows best. No.
Of course, it was fate for Adam to come down to earth.
Yeah, it was already written. Yeah, it wasn't just because of his sin. No. Inshallah. Any other questions? Inshallah. Okay. بارك الله فيكم جزاكم الله خيرا سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Thank you all for attending and listening inshallah ta'ala and being attentive with us. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.